And intelligence agents captured in the U.S. have touched down at a Moscow airport. They were earlier exchanged in Vienna for 4 spies convicted in Russia. They've been flown to a U.K. military airbase. Well, despite the Cold War undertones, both the U.S. and Russia insist this is actually all a sign of improved relations. Well, let's get more from RT's correspondents across the world. Laura Emmett is in London, Yegor Puskilov here in Moscow, and GGN in Washington. First to you, Yegor, what's the latest we're hearing with this plane just landing in Domodedovo Airport?
Well, Anissa, this spy saga seems to be coming to an end. You're absolutely right. Just moments ago, a plane carrying these 10 agents who earlier confessed of working undercover in the United States has landed at Domodedovo Airport near Moscow. Earlier, they were exchanged for 4 Russians who were found guilty of spying for the West. This exchange happened in Vienna, very secret operation. 2 planes arrived there earlier on Friday, one from the United States and one from Russia. The first one transported these 10 agents from the United States, people that were deported, and the second one transported these 4 Russian individuals. Witnesses say that the exchange happened using a black van, and as soon as it was completed, the planes took off from the airport.
Well, we know, of course, that those 4 convicted spies have apparently landed in the UK. Laura Emmett is in London. Laura, what is going to happen to these 4 convicted spies?
Well, as you say, Anissa, we've had a plane arriving at Brize Norton RAF base, which is about 60 miles outside London in Oxfordshire. We assume that these 4 people on the plane were the 4 convicted spies that came from Russia. We assume that now they will be debriefed and questioned by the various agencies that they worked for in the States and in the UK. Some of that questioning will probably happen here. We have no idea whether this is the final destination for this plane or whether it's now going to take off and fly somewhere else. One thing we have heard, though, is that Igor Sutyagin, who's the atomic specialist who came from Russia, he wants to return to Russia, and apparently there's nothing stopping him from doing that. So whether this is their final destination or whether they'll be going either to Washington or, in fact, eventually back to Russia is not clear at this moment.
We, of course, were just seeing live pictures there of that plane with the 10 Russian agents, which has landed. They, of course, before that, went to court in the U.S. Guinea is in Washington for us. What happened in court in the U.S.? Remind us.
Well, Anissa, all 10 were eventually convicted of failing to get registered as agents of a foreign government, and they were ordered deported from the country. And again, all of them pleaded guilty to the charges. As we know, all 10 agreed never to return to the United States without permission from the Attorney General. Several also agreed to give up their assets in the U.S., that including real estate. On Thursday, the New York Federal Court dropped more serious charges against 8 of them. Of money laundering, as we know. Also, an important question here is what's going to happen with the kids, with the children of the defendants. We're talking about 6 children here. Each of the 3 married couples had 2 children, most of them of very young age. Obviously, all of them were born in the United States and therefore were U.S. citizens. U.S. officials said they're free to leave the country whenever they want, according to the wish of their parents and under the law of the United States, of course. But there was no information that any children were on board the flights which carried the agents to Vienna for a swap. But what we know, Russia said it will give all the assistance to bring the children to Russia. Vicky Palas, we know, was the only one among the defendants who was not recognized as a Russian citizen. She was arrested with her husband at the end of June in New York with everyone. She's originally from Peru. Vicky had worked as a columnist for a Spanish-language paper in New York. She obviously had very strong views against the U.S. government. Her lawyer said Russian officials told them that upon her arrival in Russia, Vicky could go to Peru or anywhere else she wants. She was promised free housing in Russia and a monthly paycheck of $2,000 for life, and also visas for her 2 children. That's just something that we know about Vicky there.
All right, I want to go back to Yegor, who's in Moscow. Will those who've just been transported to Russia stay in the country? What are we hearing?
Well, as Gayane just mentioned, the Russian government is offering these bonuses to every one of these 10 people, like these free flats and a lifelong pension of around $2,000 per month. But not everybody is planning to stay. For example, Vicky Pelaez officially worked as a freelancer for Peruvian TV. She says that she wants to go to Peru to live with her family. Anna Chapman, who is one of the most talked about individuals out of this whole group, she wants to go to Great Britain. She's a UK citizen and has a successful business there. But whatever each one of them decides, whether or not to stay in Russia, first they'll have to spend at least a week here to undergo questioning.
Okay, let's go over to Laura in London again. Can you tell us, Laura, more about the British connections? Of course, this story is so complicated. What do all these agents have to do with the UK, and why are they heading there?
Well, there is a seam of British influence, if you like, running through this. Yegor just mentioned Anna Chapman, who is, of course, a British citizen. She was married to a British man, and she lived in London for 5 years, as far as we know. We don't know whether she was operating as an agent while she was living here. The signs point to no, in fact. But her husband has released a lot of photographs and sold his story to several newspapers. He's been talking about her a lot recently. And as Yegor said, she may decide that she wants to come and live here. There are other British influences, though, on the other side. 2 of the 4 Russian spies that apparently landed at Bryce Norton airfield earlier this afternoon. One of them is Igor Sutyagin, who we've talked about a lot recently. He's an atomic specialist. He, in fact, was selling atomic secrets. He says that they weren't secrets, but the prosecution maintains that they were, to a company that was based here, a London company, Alternative Futures. Apparently they were then being passed to the CIA, but there's a London connection for you. And another one, Sergei Skripal, who was a military intelligence officer in Russia, and he sold the identities of Russian agents who were working in Europe to MI6. So certainly a seam of British influence, and certainly MI6 will want to talk to him, if not Igor Sutyagin as well.
And Gayane, of course, this whole story began in the United States. Give us a quick recap of how exactly it unfolded.
Well, Anissa, you're right. Everyone here points out how quickly news developed and how swiftly the swap was carried out. But when the arrest happened at the end of June, this situation was rather tense and murky, I would say. 10 people were arrested in different cities in the U.S. at the end of June. They were accused of failing to get registered as agents of a foreign government. They were accused of money laundering, and under those charges, they faced around a sentence of 20 years in prison. But there were no accusations of espionage because there was no information of secret, of classified information leaked by them. But now both Russia and the U.S. made it clear they want to leave this behind and continue on the same positive note that the relations have been, we know have been developing lately. But nevertheless, Obama's chief of staff said the arrest should be a signal to other countries that the U.S. is on guard. Well, experts say that was quite a loud signal. Former intelligence officers point out that agent swaps happened many times before, and that countries usually try to keep it under wraps. But this time, even though it resolved quite quickly, it was an all-out scandal.
And we, of course, will continue to track this very complicated, quickly developing story here in RT. For now, from around the world, our correspondents Laura Emmett in London, Yegor Pskynov in Moscow, and Gayane GGN in Washington. Now, former Soviet dissident Vladimir Bukovsky was exchanged by the USSR for a Chilean communist leader in 1976. He said during his swap, he was kept completely in the dark.
I've learned about the exchange in the plane from my mother. No one talked to me before, no one explained to me anything. I was simply taken from my jail, which is about 300 miles up north from Moscow, a top security jail where I was serving 12 years sentence. I was taken from my jail and driven to Moscow, where I stayed overnight. And in the morning, they took my clothes away and gave me, oddly enough, a very nice French suit, which really made me worried. I mean, the prisoner is not supposed to be in civilian clothes. A tie and a silk shirt and things like that. And handcuffed me. And again, the same one was driving me to whatever I wouldn't know. I was just lost in my guesses. A couple of hours later, I could hear the roar of the engines. So I immediately guessed it's airport. It's some kind of airport. And then I pretty much knew what's going on, except exchange. I knew that they were going to deport me.